All right. Good evening, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast. And I'm here today with Meyta. He is a singer and songwriter based out of Alabama. And I think his approach to music is very unique. He really has a love of storytelling and resonating with his audience through his own experiences. But before we get started, I wanted to talk with him. He has a new album coming out about a month from now. Can you go ahead and let us know more about that?
Yeah, so without going into great detail, because I look at my songwriting like a movie. Um, and what I mean by that is if I give you the spoiler, then it won't be as impactful. But there's a big change that's going to be happening with my branding and me as Meta. And the best way for me to explain it is this album I've been working on and off for 4 years now, and I'll actually be able to
Okay.
tell the story I've been wanting to tell for 4 years through this album. And it'll look different. It'll feel different. Well, I mean, it won't feel different, but it'll look different.
Okay.
And so I'm excited, really excited.
Now, in talking about story you want to tell, are you able to give a synopsis of that story, or is that giving it away?
Um, yeah, I won't be able to tell like exactly what I'm trying to say, but I can give you like an overarching goal with the album of what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
The goal with the album is to impact people that deal with suicidal thoughts and depression. And
Okay.
so I want to basically relate with those people because I mean, I never really dealt with suicidal thoughts, but I've definitely gone through very deep depression. And
Okay.
what I want to do with this album is relate with those people, but then also give them hope and show them that it's actually possible to get out of it.
That's interesting. Why do you, I think, because a lot of songwriters would say that they try to mental health is becoming a bigger issue, especially for singing, that's being addressed. What do you think will be unique about your approach to it as opposed to the several other songwriters who have written about that?
Well, I mean, you're tapping into something that I'm really passionate about, but also I would argue this is really polarizing. What I'm about to say, I actually believe you can find freedom from mental health,
Okay.
and I think a lot of these artists believe that that's not possible, and so they
Okay.
rather just relate with people and say that eventually it'll get better. But my opinion in through my art is that not eventually it'll get better. Actually, it can get better now. That's more of my approach.
How do
So
you feel that's possible? That's that because that is really unique and different. Most people, you learn to live and cope with it, right? There's not really a
absolutely.
talk about freedom. What gives you hope that there is?
My life, I really had a switch happen 3.5 years ago where I was depressed out of my mind.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden I started having joy and peace. And I was like, what's going on? So I'm Christian and Jesus has healed me from that. I love Jesus. He's changed my life. And so when I say that people can find freedom, um, I what I mean is they can look at the person that put their mental health, all these things on the cross for them, and took the pain so that we don't have to fight it anymore. That being said, doesn't mean I don't struggle, but it's a lot different now. The game is a lot different now for me because whenever I do struggle, I can just rethrow it at the cross.
So I wanted to ask you, you said three or so years ago. What started the depression for you, kickstarted it for you that you went through that season?
So Meta actually means purpose. And so when I say we have Meta, I mean we have purpose. And so the reason why is because I believe a lot of people that deal with depression and suicide and all these things, they feel worthless. And
Yeah.
so I would say that was a big point for me, uh, probably 6 7 years ago, is I felt worthless, and and that was the beginning of my depression where I was like, I grew up in a Christian household, and people were telling me what to believe, and I
Yeah.
didn't actually agree with them. Like, it didn't make any sense for me to believe everybody else is telling me to believe. And so I actually went on my own journey of discovering what I believed. And I discovered that, what if God isn't actually real? What if my purpose isn't actually in, or I mean, in Christianity, or whatever it was at the time? And
Yeah.
then I went down this rabbit hole of just um, realizing that we're all going to die. And so
Yeah.
that's when my depression just spiked like crazy. And then, yeah, it went through this journey of being depressed out of my mind until three and a half, 4 years ago, where I basically overdosed on accident, and
Okay.
was paralyzed on the ground with demons, like hearing demonic voices telling me that I'm worthless and that I'm going to die and all these things. And then
And
I,
that was during, you said that's right after the overdose happened? Or it was like, I guess, well, I
yes,
guess it'd be kind of during it, wouldn't it?
yes.
Okay. And were you
Um,
alone at the time?
yeah. So I was with my friend. He
Okay.
also, so we were just smoking weed, but there was this new thing that we put inside of it, that, come to find out, it's like equivalent to butane or something along those lines. I just found this
Okay.
out recently. And so it's really toxic, for the body. He was doing great. I don't know how he was doing great. So he was on his own in the woods doing his thing, but he also didn't have as much as I had.
Okay.
I I was alone, um, left alone, dealing with this. Not intentionally, but that's just what naturally happened because he was distracted. And so yeah, I was laying on the ground, um, paralyzed, hearing these voices, and then
And like
and then
paralyzed as in you couldn't move, or it just felt like you couldn't?
I I think it was that I couldn't move because it
Okay.
definitely felt like I couldn't. I was laying on the ground, just like I remember at one point I was like, I need to get up, and I genuinely couldn't move. I was like, okay,
Mm.
this is, I don't know what's going on. Meanwhile, I was puking, and then also hearing these voices, and so it was
And how did,
very
it's interesting
dramatic.
you say demonic. How do you know that that's what they were?
Well, from the Christian belief, anything other than God has to be a demon, and so, unless it's like an, I don't know, an angel or something along those lines, but
Right. Yeah.
usually that's not the case. So I mean, when you hear God's voice, it's usually encouraging.
Yeah.
Demonic voices are usually, trying to lie to you, and so that was the case in this moment where I know it wasn't God telling me that I'm worthless and that
Yeah.
I'm going to die, all these things, and so,
What did
that's
you do
certain.
at that moment when you're hearing that? I mean, how did you feel? Like, did you want to die?
Well, without going into detail, the month before that moment was, one of the worst times I had with my family,
Okay.
and basically I felt like a failure because I moved to New York City to go pursue my dreams with music, and then COVID hit, and so I felt
Yeah.
like a failure, and then come back to Alabama, and I'm like, yeah, so I'm back. Like, I didn't actually do this, and then,
Yeah.
you know, following that, there was a lot of like other things behind the scenes of like arguing about random stuff, and so I was at the end of my rope, really. Um, and again, I felt worthless already, and so hearing these things of like, you're worthless, you're going to die, all these things, I genuinely felt like I failed life. Um, so that's really how I felt in that moment.
And what happened after that?
I called out to Jesus and gave him a shot for the first time in my entire life, and those voices left,
Hmm.
and the paralysis left, and the puking stopped, and I
Wow.
was just laying on the ground, and that's when I really started to reconsider what I was doing in my life.
So I'm guessing is that from that happening, is that when you decided to start creating this album?
Well, I swear it was something divine. I mean, in terms of the name Meta, I created the
Yeah.
name Meta like 7, 8 years ago, and then I started this album. Um, like some of the songs that I was channeling, like that depression and all these things, are in the album on purpose, because that was a time I was really questioning what I believed, and so I'm relating with these people that are going through what I went through,
Hmm.
um, by actually going back to songs that I created around that time I was actually going through what they were going through.
Wow.
And so that's kind of how, I mean, the album has progressed into what it is now. But I've always wanted to write an album where I'm giving hope to people. I just didn't know what that hope was until 3 or 4 years ago.
Hmm. Do you, because that's interesting because I mean the podcast is, it's called Lament of Hope. And so believers grasp the idea of being able to really immerse themselves in sorrow, but it has a purpose, it has a goal. Whereas when you were mentioning earlier, a lot of songs really do just leave you in wherever you are, and there really isn't anything to do but just continue to stay there, which just gets worse. So how do you now, as you've been walking with the Lord, how do you lament? Like, because you said you still struggle. I mean, we all still struggle. Life is still hard. Things are not going to be perfect. How do you how do you lament and find hope in that for other people?
I can give an example of a time that I was at a really dark time, but I was still Christian. So this was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. I went through a breakup that felt like a divorce. And because of how close we were, I moved across the country. Hopefully, she doesn't see this. I moved across the country for her. I say that because I told her I didn't move for her. So I moved across the country for her. I moved to San Diego from Alabama, and we
Okay.
broke up the week that I moved. And so I'm stuck in this apartment. Don't know anyone really. I have a roommate, but we barely know each other, and so I'm just laying here, and I can't afford really anything. And I am really depressed. I have all the reason to be depressed. But in that moment, I asked God to comfort me. And it felt like Jesus was hugging me. Um, and so it's not that he necessarily takes the pain away, but he's there through the pain. And so
Hmm.
that's the beauty of being a believer, is there's a difference, hugely in that, because when you're going through the pain with God, it's very comforting.
I want to ask you, Maida, how do you feel about um because the music industry is not super keen on Jesus, on theology. Um, and this is going to be a new step for you because you're going to come out and it's going to be very personal. It's going to be kind of attached to you as a person. Are you worried about the reception it's going to receive? Have you wrestled with that? How are you approaching that? Okay, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I believe in, but a lot of people may not see it the same way.
I mean, yes, I've definitely wrestled with it for sure. It's not something that I'm going to be screaming on the album. I also want people to interpret certain songs to their own story. A lot of the
Right.
songs I want them to interpret into their own story. But in terms of the hope I'm trying to give people, there's no denying what I'm trying to say. I believe at the end of the day, eventually people will figure it out, and there will be resistance that follows that, and I've kind of come to terms with that. But the way I look at it is, if I'm actually telling the truth, people are going to hate me. So if I actually want to see lives change, there's going to be hatred. But if I wanted to live a life of being neutral, I would be liked by everyone, but I wouldn't really see the change that I'm trying to see. So that's
Yeah.
kind of that's where I'm at.
What, being your own content creator in a lot of ways, how is that, how have you grown in that process, being able to create your music and market it, all of these things, having an agent? How did you grow in that? Because a lot of content creators are, striving to reach some sort of goal of being known, people seeing their work. How have you walked through that?
I think so. I used to do spoken word videos. I think like 3.5 years ago. I'm also friends with a lot of content creators, and so I have kind of had that I don't know how to say this, like a shortcut in terms of content creation. But I've my secret has always been vulnerability. I think a
Hmm.
big thing with content creators is they're just kind of making videos, and I don't really see any genuinity unless you're like a comedian or something. It's like that's totally chill. But I really think like if you're trying to impact people,
Yeah.
then relating to them, relating to what they're going through is a very powerful way of doing that. But this all goes back. I mean, this is marketing 101. This is all I'm going to say with marketing, and then I'll stop here because I don't want to give all my secrets away. But essentially, like if you're trying to do well with marketing, you got to know what you're going after. Like I think a lot of
Yeah.
times these content creators don't even know what their goals are. If their goals are just to become famous, then I honestly would argue that's a pretty lousy goal. Being famous is, I mean, it's cool. You get perks, but that's it. Like people like you. That's all right. Like my goal
Mm,
is to actually change people, see people change, and so the means of that happening is fame, but it's not, the fame is not the end all be all, and so that's what
mm,
drives me, and that's why it's very easy for me to not burn out when it comes to content creation. And I think that's where a lot of people they fail is they don't have goals, and so they end up burning out and yeah,
mm.
and so on and so forth. So,
What do you think's the hardest thing about being a content creator?
ooh, that's a good question. Um, I don't know. I'd say maybe probably you're pioneering, like pioneering new ideas is a challenge and can be a challenge, but that's also the exciting part. And so sometimes it's like when you don't have any ideas, it's probably the hardest part because I don't know. Okay, sorry, I'm like answering different ways. I think the hardest part is probably comparison. I think that's the biggest thing as a content creator is comparison that comes up for almost every content creator is like, oh, someone's doing it better than me, or someone's growing more drastically, and all these things, which then goes back to what is your goal in the first place. Like
Mm,
there's a guy that's in a similar field that I am, and he just hit 100K followers, and I think the natural response is to compare myself to him, but in reality we're both going after the same thing. And so I'm celebrating that he hit 100K. That's incredible. We're not competing. And so I think for a lot of people, they treat it like a competition or a race when we're all kind of going after the same thing, if we're in the same field. So,
10 years from now, what would you like your life to look like with music?
hmm. I don't know if I'll be doing music 10 years from now. I don't know. But I could answer more 5 years,
Okay.
or even 3 years. I see myself, um, or even 1 year. I see myself touring,
Okay.
touring the world. That's my goal is to tour the world and meet the kids, meet the people that are dealing with what I used to deal with. That's my biggest desire. And so my goal with growth is just that alone, and I hope to do that for years on end. Now 10 years from now, I could see myself being 30, whatever, married and having kids and making orchestral music or something, for like movies. That's yeah. But anyways, that's completely different.
When you do you think you're close to the touring goal?
Absolutely. I think I was realizing this past week. I was like, I mean, so the beginning of this year, or yeah, the beginning of this year, I decided to go after this fully, like just full time, and I've grown 1,000% in the past 12 months,
Hmm.
um, since last year. And so if I grow 1,000% next year, um, if I keep going at the pace I'm going at, then yes, it's inevitable. It's bound to happen, and I'm already having like small venues and stuff like that reach out to me for performances, and so
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I think it's bound to happen. I'm excited. I'm just also like, whoa, this is very quick. It's a lot.
What are you, is there a specific city you'd like to go to visit?
In the US or just in general?
It could be in general, yeah.
I think in the US, our goal is to hit Dallas, um, because that's where my top listeners are right now.
Okay.
But in general, I would love to go to Germany, some kind of city in Germany.
That's interesting. Why do you think your high listener viewership is in Texas, in Dallas?
I don't know. I have no
That's
idea
really
actually.
interesting. Yeah.
It's random, but yeah, I think that's the case for a lot of people in my field. Dallas is the highest one. I actually have no idea.
I did want to ask too. I know you mentioned that you had a hard spot with your family. How is your relationship with your family now? Like, especially as relates to your music. Like, are they
Hmm.
encouraging you and are active in helping you, or how is that now?
You're hitting a little nerve on me. I think my relationship with my family is great. Now it's the best it's ever been. In terms of my relationship with my career with my family, it's much different. I
Okay.
think honestly, my family just doesn't understand. And when I explain it to them, they just don't get it. And it's really hard for them to understand, I guess, because they won't necessarily take the time to understand. And so that's yeah, that's a little frustrating with me. But besides that, my relationship with them is actually really good. But I'm gonna take them to my album release show next month, and I think
Okay.
I think they'll begin to understand what I'm doing
Are you nervous?
for the show. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's a big switch for me. Um, my shows this past year was just a normal performance with me just singing, but this without again spoiling the show, this album release show is like a play,
Yeah.
um, and with visuals, and so that's a huge switch. I've been wanting to do this for so many years, and so I'm like, part of me is like being a perfectionist, where I'm like, I have to get this right. Um, but I think it'll be good.
And do you think I mean, are you hopeful that your family might like it?
I'm pretty sure they'll like it. I don't think they're gonna look at it and be like, "You're crazy." I just don't think they understand right now. And I think once they actually get a glimpse of it, they'll be like, "Oh, okay, I get it now."
Now, are you able to support yourself with what you do?
Financially, it's is that what you mean? Financially?
Yeah.
Financially, I for the past year I've been working a sound job, like running
Okay.
sound. But as my music grows, which I think around March or April, we get paid quarterly through our
Okay.
music. And so I haven't been able to pay myself until it's not going to be until March or April. But when that happens, it's going to be a huge drastic change for me, because then I'll be able to put all my time even more into music.
So this is your first time then in 2024 will be when you can financially support yourself to some extent. And you've been doing this for how long?
8 years.
Okay. So how did you not grow discouraged? Because like I mean, I know you did say that you have a goal and having a purpose, but I mean, have you been discouraged by the growth and that it's not like overnight that this is happening?
Hmm, that is a good question. Um, no, no. Um, I think I've always known this is going to happen. I just didn't know when. And
Okay.
so, I mean, to me, it actually feels quick. I thought it would be much slower. So I don't have that reaction at all of like, oh, it should be overnight. But I mean, if you actually look at the pattern of people that grow drastically, very rare is it overnight. It
Hmm.
usually, even the new artists that people are like, oh, it's a new rising artist. Dude has been grinding for like 6 years or something behind the scenes. And then when you actually like interview the person, and he's like, Yeah, bro, it's crazy that people have actually just found out about me now. I've been doing this thing for a while, like on SoundCloud or whatever. It's usually the story. So I've kind of known that for a while. And so I'm just like, I'm just gonna keep going until it happens. Um and It's starting to happen. So yeah.
Do you have a music inspiration?
Yes. I have so many music inspirations. I come from a background of EDM.
Okay.
Um but I recently have been listening to indie and cinematic music, I also listen to hip hop and pop, and I mean there's just so many inspirations. I feel like it'd be unfair to target on the one in particular.
Do you have any like musicians that you can name that you really enjoy and maybe have gotten some ideas from?
Again, I feel like it'd be unfair to target individually because like literally it's like pieces of each of these musicians.
Okay.
I've been putting a puzzle piece together from like thousands of artists. I come from a background of playlisting. I used to playlist for money. So
Okay.
I'd make Spotify playlists with like like literally like some songs it's like just one song of an artist that nobody knows about. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of how my inspiration goes. So unfortunately,
Did
can't
you
answer it
enjoy
properly.
music when you were a kid? Have you always loved music or?
No, my family was musical, and so I've always I think I have a personality of wanting to be different. I
Okay.
think so like Enneagram like 3 and 4 or something, and so I think the 4 like really comes out in my life a lot of times. Um, where my family they were all musical, and so I was like I'm not gonna do that. And so for the longest time I was like every time I had a liking of music, I was like, no, 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 no. But then 15 years old, I was honest with myself and I was like, I'm doing this for the rest of my life. So, yeah.
But I mean, if this is too personal, it's fine. You can say you don't know how to answer, but I wanted to ask because if your parents are musical and your family is musical, is it more the fear that you financially can't support yourself, that there's kind of an obstacle to enjoying what you do? Because if they love music, where is the bump in the road for them?
I think, uh, I think you're hitting the nail on the head for them, but not for me.
Okay.
When I actually went after music, I think the community in Alabama is very safe. Like it's like let's go to the safest route on everything. And so when I told my parents I'm going after music, they were like, "You just got to get a job. Like you got to do it. Like you got to go to college. All this stuff."
Okay.
Um, like it was different from them where they were like doing music part time. I was like, I'm doing this for the rest of my life, like
Yeah.
fully. And so they definitely thought I was crazy for a while. They ended up apologizing to me actually 3 years ago, where they were like, "Hey, we just want to apologize, and we realize that you're actually supposed to be doing this,"
Hmm. Okay.
which that was pretty cool. But yeah, I dropped out of college. I did things that a lot of people weren't doing at the time in Alabama, and I got a lot of slack for it, but not anymore. So I don't get slack for it anymore.
Do you think you'll go back to college?
Uh, Maybe in some sense. I mean, I have like this dream of becoming a pilot one day.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's very different than
So
music.
I know. So maybe I don't even know if you have to go to college for pilot becoming a pilot, but if that's the case, then yes.
Why do you want to be a pilot?
I don't know. I just love the sky, like being in the sky and looking down and just taking in a view of some kind because you're able to realize that you're actually really small in
Hmm.
this huge world and that your problems probably aren't that big after all in comparison to this huge world.
Hmm. Well, Meta, I want to ask you one more question. I know you need to go. Um, how would you encourage people who are content creators, who are, maybe they have a really good heart behind what they're doing, but it's not going the way they expected, or they're just really discouraged about the content they're creating, how would you encourage them?
Um, I would say that, oh man, this is a huge question. I mean, the biggest thing is realizing that it comes down to consistency. And like if you're gonna build a entire house, you gotta take it slow and easy. I would even say you take it slower than building a house. When you're building a house, it takes maybe like 3 or 4 months. But I would say like with the content creation game, it's a day by day. It's a placing a
Mm,
brick every single day, and then eventually you'll have a whole entire house. If not in 3 or 4 months, in a year, or 2 years. But also, it's important to realize what your goals are, and if your goals aren't that great, then maybe make them great, and then you probably will actually have a lot more drive towards what you're doing.
hmm. Well, again, listeners, you're listening to Lament of Hope podcast, and I'm here today with Meyta, talking about his upcoming album as well as his um, really realization of what his purpose is in life. And so I highly recommend, stay tuned for his album. Would they find it on, would they find it on like your Instagram or Spotify, or where will be announcements on its publication?
Then announcements will be on Instagram.
Okay. All right. Well, you heard it. Check out the Instagram. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was very encouraging to me too. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.